Hello and welcome back to the channel. For today's story, I'll be sharing with you how to make this off-shoulder ruffle sleeve. So if it's your first time, please like, share and subscribe, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you. So this is the fabric I'm working with. It's actually a taffeta, so you can use an organza, a satin, or whatever material you're working with. So I'm going to still iron it during the process, although it's rumpled. So the first thing you're going to do is to measure wherever you're going to attach this to. If you're going to attach it to your shoulder, round shoulder, you're going to measure your round shoulder. So for this tutorial, I'm just attaching it in front of a dress. So I've already cut out a fabric. So the length of the fabric I have is 28 inches. So I measured what I have in front of the dress and I extended it a bit towards the sleeve. So the measurement I have there is 24 inches, and I added 2 inches extra at the sides in case I have shortage. The 2 inches is at both sides. So I'm going to measure what I have here is about 6 inches on fold. So for the width, I have 12 inches. Folding it into 2, I have 6 inches on fold, and the total length is 28 inches. So next, what I'm going to do is that at the end, I'm going to sew about ½ inch down, and I'm going to turn it to the right side after sewing. So that will be the fabric you'll be sewing the ruffle on. So for the fabric you'll be making the ruffle with, the length of the fabric is 80 inches and is 15 inches on fold. For the width, I have 15 inches on fold, and for the length, I have 80 inches. So the width 15 inches on fold, making it 30 inches. So the 80 inches length and 15 inches on fold is not a constant, depending on the length or the size of the ruffle you want to make. So going down to the lower part of the fabric, I'm going to sew with ½ inch down, and I'm going to flip it also to the right side. So I'm done sewing, and this is what I have right now. So the next thing you're going to do is to take that part where you stitched, and you're going to place it in the middle of the fabric this way. You're going to make sure that part you sewed on is at the middle of the material you're working with. So the reason why you're doing this is that you don't want to have any rough edges or joining at the tip of your ruffle. So by the time you're done sewing your ruffle, this will be at the back of the ruffle. Next, you're going to flip it to the other side. The next thing you're going to do is to place your tape, and you're going to mark 1 inch at the beginning. So you can go ahead and mark out that 2 inches allowance, but I decided to mark 1 inch at this point, and you're going to draw a line. So from this line now, that is where you're going to start your ruffle from. So next, you're going to determine how wide or big you want your ruffle to be. So from that line, I'm going to place my tape, that 1 inch line, and I'm going to measure 6 inches, and I'm going to draw the line straight. So this 6 inches I'm drawing is not a constant. You can decide to use another measurement. So from that point also, I'll place my tape, and I'm going to mark 6 inches again, and I'm going to extend it upwards and downwards. So from that 6 inches again, I'm going to make another 6 inches mark. So you're going to continue marking 6 inches. Now this 6 inches is the size of the ruffle you want to create. Like I said, the 6 is not a constant. If you want your ruffle to be bigger or smaller, you can decide. So if you want it to be bigger, you can use more than 6 inches. If you want it to be smaller, you can also do so. So I'll continue marking the lines to the end. So the next thing I'll do is that I'll sew a gather stitch on this line. Starting from this point, I'm going to sew a gather stitch at that point. That's my starting point. So after sewing a gather stitch there, I will continue sewing a gather stitch to the other lines that I've drawn. So I'll go ahead and I will extend this 6 inches. I'll continue marking it to the end of the fabric that I have, and I'm going to sew a gather stitch on any 6 inches mark I make to the end of the fabric. So next, after sewing your gather stitch, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to drag it to give you this gathers effect. So I'm going to do that right now. After dragging the first one, I'll go ahead and I will also drag it to the last, and I'll make sure I sew to the end. Please, while dragging to form a gathers effect, be careful to avoid your rope from cutting, because if your rope should cut, you're going to start afresh. So after dragging this one, this is what I have. This is the ruffle effect I have at this point. So as you can see, it's looking very nice. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to drag this other one also. So while doing this, please be careful to avoid the rope from losing or cutting. To drag your gather stitch, you're just going to loosen the 2 ropes, and you're just going to take one and you're going to use that one to drag it to form a ruffle. Please, at this point, if you find my video very interesting and educative, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, leave your comment at the comment section, and also share. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always watching and supporting my channel. So this is what I have. I'm done dragging this, so I'm going to do this on the other gather stitches that I have sewed also, and I'm going to do it to the end of the fabric. So I'm going to bring it and also show you when I'm done. So I've gone ahead and I've gathered all the stitch, and this is the effect that I have. This is the ruffle effect that I have. The next thing I'm going to do is to bring the second piece. So we'll be attaching the ruffle to the second piece. So what I'm going to do right now is to place my tape, and I'm going to mark 1 inch. And also remember, before we gathered the ruffle or sewed it, we marked 1 inch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick the ruffle at that 1 inch I marked, and at the 1 inch I gathered the ruffle on. I'm going to take the ruffle part and I'm going to place it on the other piece this way. So I'm going to make sure the ruffle aligns with the second piece. So before I do that, I'll go ahead and I will mark the other measurement. So from that 1 inch, I'm going to mark 2.5 inches. But later along the line, I readjusted it to 2 inches because I noticed the gap was too much. So I'll advise you not to exceed more than 2.5 inches, because the more space you give, the more gapping your ruffle will have. So it's best to use about 1.5, 2 inches or 2.5 inches if you want to see the best results. So you're going to continue marking this line to the end of your fabric. So I'm just going to stop here and show you how to attach the ruffle to your material. So next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up the ruffle. So at that 1 inch mark I marked, and at the 1 inch side I started on the ruffle, I'm going to place it together and I'm going to pin. So it's advisable for you to pin if you're going to find it difficult to sew directly, but if you can sew directly, that's okay. So first I'm going to pick up my pin and I'm going to make sure the ruffle sits on that first 1 inch mark that I made earlier. So I'm done pinning the first gather stitch I made on the first line. So going over to the second part, so on that line also I'm going to take the second gather stitch and I'm going to make sure it sits on that line. So I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to pin. So for those that want to sew directly, you're going to make sure your line or your stitch sits on that line that you've made, and you're going to sew it carefully on the sewing machine. So just like I said earlier, I went ahead to readjust my line to 2 inches. So this is what I'm going to do right now. I'm readjusting my line back to 2 inches. After readjusting my line, I'm going to place back my ruffle on that 2 inches. And please note the thread from the gather stitch, do not cut it out until you're done sewing to avoid the gather stitches from scattering. So I'll go back and I'll continue pinning my ruffle down on that line. So after I'm done pinning the second ruffle, so this is what I have. This is the effect that I have at this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and pin the second ruffle. So to do this, I'm going to get that point that I sewed my gather stitch, and I'm going to place it on the 2 inches line that I marked also, and I'm going to pin it down just the same way I pinned the first one. So just like I said, if you can easily sew it directly, you can go ahead and sew it, but if you're finding it difficult to do, it's best to pin it and then go over to the machine and run a stitch on it. I'm done sewing and this is what I have. So next I'm going to mark 2 inches for the next ruffle. Like I said earlier, I readjusted my line and this is the 2 inches. So after marking the 2 inches, I'm going to go ahead and place the next gather stitch on it, and I'm going to pin just like the same way I did for my first 2 ruffles. So I'm gradually going to pin it down to form another ruffle. So after pinning it down, this is what I have. So you're going to continue this process to the end. So as you can see, it's looking very nice. So at this point, yours is supposed to look like this also. So I'm going to continue making this ruffle to the end of my material. So if your material does not reach or is not enough to make the ruffle you want, you can go ahead and add extra material to it and continue. So I'm going to complete the ruffle to the end, and I'm also going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch it. Then I'm going to bring it for you to see the final look of the ruffle that I have made. So I'm done sewing on the ruffles and this is what I have. Next, you're going to fold in the rough edge at the side and you're going to top stitch it with 1/2 inch. After top stitching, I'm going to take my needle and thread and I will attach it on the body of the dress that I've made already. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification button.